having me. It's wonderful to be here.
I loved reading your bio. I loved hearing your path and your passion for customer experience and culture.
Yeah.
And what do you call yourself? A culture starter? Culture
Cultural fire starter.
starter, fire
That may
starter.
be good or bad, depending on your business. So,
But you're also an author. You've just
yeah,
recently written a book, which I'm so excited to hear about today, called The
yeah,
Villain Trap.
yeah,
And then you've got this really cool kind of techie business that you started, bootstrapped and started
yeah.
an AI voice business. So we're going to talk about that too in the future of
Cool.
customer experience. So
Awesome.
welcome. I always love hearing stories of our guests because our listeners are difference makers who want to make an impact.
Yeah,
Love to hear your story about how you got from, you know,
sure.
Chris, probably in high school to where you are
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
And what were the things, the red thread of consistency through there that
yeah.
was a passion of yours?
Oh, wow. It's great because all of what you just said ties in together. So I start by telling people that I grew up, unfortunately, in a family of victims, a family of people who I loved. I always say, don't get me wrong, but could not accept accountability and responsibility for their decisions and their actions. It was
Mm,
always somebody else's fault, right? There was
hmm.
always a reason they couldn't do this or they couldn't do that. And I share this story in the book, and I watched my dad go down that path, and then ultimately my younger brother. And I
Mm.
also saw where that led. My dad died at 54, and my younger brother committed suicide at 32.
Oh,
And
Chris.
so, yeah, I say that because I watched how being an intentional victim and not being able to accept accountability just eroded the quality of their life and everybody around them. And if it wasn't for my grandfather, Dana, who was probably the most influential person in my life, I probably would have gone down that road as well. But my
Wow.
grandfather taught me one very important thing, and he said, "It's probably your fault." I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, "We're all culpable. We
Mm,
all play a part in everything that happens to us, regardless." And smart people understand where they've messed up. They can acknowledge it, they can correct it, and they can move on. And other people just blame everybody else and they stay stuck. Right.
mm,
And so that fueled my passion for accountability and transparency and honesty. And early in my career, I actually have a degree in criminal justice. A lot of people don't know that. And so I started my career wanting to go into law enforcement, and I actually did. I became a correctional officer for several years and worked in a jail. Very humbling
I
job.
bet.
But someone, I got into retail by, as most people do, just, oh, I'll go do this job for a year and then I'll get out and I'll go away. And that blossomed into 35 years of being able to work for companies like Target Corporation and Home Depot and Toys R Us. And I was fortunate in my career that I was surrounded by people who were servant leaders, people who understood that leadership was not about them. It was about everybody around them. And so that kind of fueled my spirit around this idea of being a servant leader. And that's what our leaders should be. And about 4 years ago, I just had a bit of a calling that says, you got to put this on paper, this whole idea of the villain trap and how people fall into it and the blame bubble and then what it does. And so it just became a passion project for me that I worked on for 4 years. And then I finally got serious and said, okay, I got to finish it, and just launched the book in early May. But my hope with it is I feel like we're at a place societally where it's all about me, it's all about self,
Mm,
and it's so easy to blame other people because we have role models at all levels right now that do nothing but blame other people for their issues and their poor decisions, that I think it's so timely to get this book out on top of what AI is going to do and transform how we live and how we work. So I've always had a passion for service. I've always had a passion for helping people, whether that's helping customers or helping the people that I lead. And I think this book is just really a culmination of 54 years of life and experience and work all coming together in the hopes that I can get one person maybe that's stuck in that blame bubble
mhm.
to think differently and to really enrich their life going forward.
I love your story of how your grandfather made a difference in your life. I
Yeah.
think sometimes we are just
Yeah.
generationally, we see our parents and their
Yeah.
grandparents, and there's a commonality we hear
Yes.
about, oh, well, my grandmother, she used to
Yeah.
blame everybody,
Yeah.
or my granddad, or,
Right.
and then we show up in the workplace and we think it's
Yeah.
normal that I can blame
Normal. Yeah.
people and
Yeah.
not be accountable because you might have grown up with that. But I love that your grandfather challenged
Mm.
you with that, and then
Yeah.
that challenged your life. It sounds like he was your first mentor in life.
Oh, yeah. And still to this day, the biggest mentor in my life. I mean, there hasn't been anybody that I've had a lot of, people that have impacted me, but not in the way that he impacted me. I tell people he ultimately saved my life, from where I was growing up and the conditions I was living in. So I owe him a tremendous amount of praise and respect.
And now you've written this book. There was and we talked in the green room about authenticity and how
Yeah.
important it is to be your authentic self
Yes.
and what that means. And as you're thinking about the villain trap and getting rid of those
Mm.
old files you've carried with you
Yeah.
in your life and created this book, who is this book for? And
Yeah.
what do you hope that once they read the villain trap, that they'll take from it?
Yeah, I love that question. The concept was formed out of two other concepts. So there's a concept called the drama triangle, and there's a concept called the victim loop. People are probably more familiar with the victim loop. Stephen Covey talked about that in some of his books, but I didn't feel either of those took this idea of blame and lack of accountability far enough to really show people how damaging it is in your life when you do that. And so I wrote the book from a leadership perspective, just simply because that is my background and my experience and how to lead. But the last chapter in the book I included strategically. It's called The Villain Trap at Home,
Mm,
because it doesn't stop at work, right? And arguably, a lot of people who have read the book and read that last chapter, because I talk about how we villainize our spouses, how we villainize our children, our in-laws, family members. We do it inherently, and there's nobody out there that does not do this. Ultimately, we all do it. And then
mhm.
I talk about how that impacts us at work, because you're not just a leader at work, you're a leader at home, you're a leader in your church, in your community. And so this is something that transcends just thinking about an employee and employer relationship. This is something as human beings that we all fall into every single day, no matter how old we are or how young we are. And right now, and you and I talked about this, is we're living in a world that's just seems to have everybody pointing the finger at each other. Well,
Mhm.
regardless, like we've seen it from our leaders in government, we're seeing it from world leaders. We're seeing wars happen, continuing to happen as a result of it, because it's easier for people to blame and to not have to look internally and say, what is my part in this? Because that would mean you have to admit that maybe you're not as good as you think you are,
Mhm.
right? And it's an ego issue. And so that's my hope. My hope is that people are tired of the finger pointing and the blaming, whether that's at your work or in your home life or just in general. And people say, you know what, there's got to be something more. And they'll read the book and hopefully understand that they're losing power by blaming, and that you supercharge your life the minute you take responsibility for your actions, because we all make mistakes every single day. And one of the things I think that's important in the book is this concept of, when you acknowledge your part in a situation, you kind of strip the other person bare, because two people go in looking for a fight, and
Mhm.
it's going to be, you did this, no, you did this. And the first person that comes in and says, Dana, you know what, I've looked at this situation and let me tell you what I could have done differently. Let me tell you my part of it. You're defenseless at that point in time, because you can't blame me, because I just took accountability for myself. So what happens is that you are more inclined to go, you know what, I appreciate that. I also thought about it, and this is what I could have done differently. And then we work for something in the ownership cycle called authentic repair, and how do we repair the relationship. So that it's a utopian vision, I think, a little bit, but a beautiful one in my mind. And if I can just help a few people go from a place of being in this blame bubble that I talk about and moving out and reclaiming their power as a leader by accepting accountability and responsibility, then that's exactly what the book was for.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think one of the things that I just got off the phone with somebody who's planning a trip and they're worried about traveling. And, I'm like, what are you listening to?
Right.
Stop listening to all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is I was just talking to a leader yesterday who's said our biggest challenge is accountability. So the leader sees it, but the employee might not see it.
Right.
And it's how do you as a leader help someone understand that it's within?
That's
It's,
right.
and this is that changing me changes everything, right? So how do you as a leader coach your employee who's not wanting to be accountable or feeling
Yeah.
like they need to be accountable? What
Yeah.
have you found with that,
Yeah.
Chris?
Well, the first thing the leader has to do is make sure that they're not in the villain trap, villainizing the employee. Because the way the villain trap typically works from a leadership perspective, right, is there's a trigger. There's something that happens that it's cognitive dissonance, right? It
Right.
makes me uncomfortable. And the example that I use is, you've just put together this beautiful PowerPoint presentation and you send it to one of your employees and say, will you look this over and give me some feedback? And then you get it back a day later and it's red marked all over with stuff and notes.
Mhm.
And the first thing you think to is like, wait a minute, I'm the boss here. And this is a beautiful PowerPoint. Who are you to give me all these red lines, right? And that's the trigger. That's how it kind of starts. And then from there, we go what we call the victim reflex, which is, well, why would Dana do that? Why would Dana redline this whole thing and send it to me? I worked on this really hard. I know my stuff. Does she not think I know my stuff? And then that turns into creating a story, creating a villain. And so suddenly Dana becomes the villain in my story now, where I'm thinking, you know what? I know Dana hasn't always liked me. That's why she's redlining this. She's trying to discredit me by
Mhm.
doing this. And your ego then is now telling you and feeding you this story about Dana. And what happens is then I start to justify. And then I go to Mary and I say, Mary, you know what Dana did? She sent me this red line stuff. And guess what Mary does? Mary says, oh yeah, Dana. Oh yeah, she's gunning for your job, right? And so that's that emotional justification that we get. And then what happens is I no longer send you stuff. I treat you a little bit differently, right? You're not coming to the meetings you used to come to because I've villainized you. And now I'm quietly putting you in the corner. And this happens every day, millions and millions and millions of times. So that's why I say the first thing the leader has to do is make sure that they're not in the villain trap, villainizing the employee. And that's what we talk about in the book. So if I can confirm that I'm not in the villain trap, that my employee is in the villain trap, there's some really cool stuff in the book that helps you kind of work through that. And the first part of working through that goes back to the ownership cycle, which is acknowledging your part. And I just used this example on another podcast. It's a real world example. I actually had a leader come to me and they're like, I want to fire this person. And I said, okay, why? And they gave me this laundry list of reasons of why. And I said, okay, what's your role in it? What do you mean? What do you mean, what's my role? So they're not doing well. You hired them, right? Yep. And when you hired them, you loved them. Yep, sure did. Now, 6 months later, you're telling me they don't work out. And that may be true, but I need you to come back to me and tell me all the things you could have done differently to help that person be better. And so that's that concept and idea of helping people out of it. You've got to force them to acknowledge and see what they're doing wrong. And if it's an employee that's in the trap, you can't go about and say, you know what, you're a victim, you're not doing these things. You do what I mentioned earlier, which is you start with, Dana, things have been rough over the last 6 months, but I've thought about this. And I want to tell you, I don't think I've done enough for you. I don't think I've given you enough time and attention. And it goes back to that accepting my part. And it just changes the whole dynamic and the whole relationship with that individual. So in the book, we give you a lot of tools and a lot of examples on basically how to sit down with people and do that.
And I think that's the powerful thing is looking within. You can't change other people, but you can change yourself and
That's
then be
right.
that role model. And I think it's if you haven't had that role model and it just keeps trickling
That's
down,
right.
it's the powerful leaders I see that just kind of put a stop to some of that and create that culture,
Yeah.
because they're creating the culture within their
Yeah.
teams,
That's
not
exactly
just
right.
that leader.
Yeah.
So, as you think about this book and as you think about those examples, can you share anything that you've seen as a transformation, either after you wrote the book or while you're writing the book with one of your clients, or somebody that you worked with that went through kind of this transformation
Yeah.
after they got that awareness of, oh, I'm the leader, but I'm accountable and I haven't
That's
done that.
right. Yeah. Yeah. It's been really cool, because I've had people that have worked for me that I
Mhm.
have personally coached and developed read this book and then call me and say, I now understand what you were doing, right? They didn't understand it at the time, but they now read the book and they see some of the practices and some of the things that were deployed, and they say, I see it now. And one person actually told me something that was pretty powerful. They said, you've put into words what we all know has been a problem. We just can't define it.
Mm.
And so what it does is it brings clarity, I think, to them if they're willing to read the book, if they're willing to sit and really challenge themselves. And so I've seen some of those. I mean, I had another lady call me and said, can we set up 30 minutes and talk? I just got finished with the book. Can I talk to you about it? And I said, sure. And we got on. And what really hit her was the last chapter about the villain trap at home, because she has a teenage son. And she
Mm.
said, I read this and I realized all the things I was doing wrong. All the, you walk into the house and the kid's got the headphones on, the dishes are dirty in the sink, and you're doing all this stuff. And, as a mom or a dad, you're like, oh my God, you're so lazy. Like, why are, what? And you create a story about this person that's probably the most cherished thing in your life, but you villainize that person. And then you attack, right? Because you're going in and you think you can beat them into submission. And she just had this epiphany about how she was doing it wrong with her son, and said, you know what, I'm going to identify when I'm falling into that trap. Because in the ownership cycle, there's the second step after you acknowledge that you're going there is what's called reframing. And reframing is not new, it's been out there. But what we do is give you 5 words. What else could be true? So when that story starts to form about how lazy your kid is and how they don't appreciate anything and all this, they're laying on the couch, they haven't done anything, you stop yourself and you say, what other story could it be? Right? Maybe they had a tough day. Maybe something happened at school. They're decompressing before they did something. You don't know. And
Mhm.
so that really, really resonated with her. And that was really cool for me because it wasn't necessarily a business leadership thing. It was something more, more deep and more personal to her that she took away something out of it. So that's a story that's going to stay with me.
I bet.
Yeah,
And really, just, I think, I've raised, my daughter's all grown with kids now, but you go, God, why didn't I know that then? Why did
mhm,
I, why was I so codependent? Why was I
mhm.
so
That's
people
right.
pleasing? And you see it. I talk with leaders all the time that
Yeah,
see it and they say it. I'm people pleasing, or I'm
yeah,
being codependent with my people.
yeah,
I'm not really pushing them or my
yeah,
kids.
yeah.
And so you are one person,
That's
Chris.
right.
It's hard to define, between the work and the home lines, because
That's
we
right.
are we're
We are.
one person bringing
Yeah.
that in. So I love how your approach is really making a difference there, and I kind of see your past kind of woven in with what you experienced, and then even when you worked in police work, I guess you
Yeah.
were working
Correctional
with
officer. Yeah.
juveniles and
Yeah.
all kinds of people, and you saw it too
Yeah.
there. But then you got to work in the workplace, and
Yeah.
it's the
And there,
same,
there's an
right?
old saying in corrections. There's nobody guilty in jail.
Uh,
Right? Like you ask anybody, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Right? That's just. But that also speaks to how we're conditioned from a very early age to not accept responsibility. Right? My best example is, back in the day, I don't even know if they still do driver's ed and education anymore, but when you go through driver's education, what's the first thing they tell you? Never admit fault in an accident, even if it's your fault. And
yeah.
so early on, we're kind of led to believe that not taking responsibility and ownership is better. It's safer for me.
Mhm.
And that's just it's a societal thing that I believe has gotten worse over the last 5 years.
I'm excited about this work, and it really ties into the work we do about authenticity and knowing yourself and realizing you've got to change you. You can't
Yeah.
change everybody else. So, as you think from your experience with running these amazing organizations at Target and Home Depot and Toys R Us with customer experience, and then you've written this book, but then you've also been working on this little project, this
Yeah.
technology project
Yeah.
with AI.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I consider myself a perpetual student. I like to learn many things. And so when Chat GPT kind of hit the scene 2.5 years ago, like most everybody, it was kind of like, wow, what is this and what is its potential and where is it going to take us? And being an old customer service contact center passionate about experience, one of the things that I think really struck me was how artificial intelligence was going to redefine how we talk to each other,
Mm,
specifically how you interact with business. And if you look at what's happened over the last 20 years with voice, nobody calls a call center anymore unless you absolutely have to,
right.
because you're on hold forever. You're talking to somebody you probably don't understand well. They have limited information. They don't know everything. And that's what gave rise to things like chat and text and WhatsApp based customer service. But what's cool about AI is it's going to redefine voice because the lowest level of effort is picking up the phone, having somebody answer on the first ring, answering your question, saying thank you, and hang up. You do not get faster than that. And that's what's happening with voice. And so 2.5 years ago, I'm like, this is going to redefine everything we do on many different levels. And so about 6 months ago, I said, I'm going to build a platform because I see a tremendous opportunity to help small and medium businesses, arguably the backbone of this country's business model, who don't have the money, don't have the time, and don't have the resources. And I'm going to develop a platform where I can go and I can help them because these are the businesses that can't answer their phones because they're typically the people out doing the work. And so they come home at 6:30 at night after working a full day and they've got 15 voicemails that they got to respond to. They're leaving money on the table and they know it. And so I set up a company called Caller Base AI. We're a voice driven agentic AI platform focused on helping small and medium businesses. Inbound calls is what we do right now, but we can do things from sales to service to recruitment to intake, different voices, different models to be able to do that. And officially launched the company 2 months ago. And to be honest with you, I'm a bit overwhelmed with the response, that I've gotten from
Right.
small business owners. And this is just tip of the iceberg. I mean, this is the voice models. I've heard some voice models that you will absolutely not know is AI. I mean, it's getting that good. And look, there's a lot of legal, things and ethical things that go along with it. But every major technological advancement that's happened, in America over the last 200 years has led to this progression of betterment for
Mhm.
people. And I think that's exactly where we are. I've never met a call center agent, Dana, that enjoys answering the phone and doing the same thing over and over and over again. They want purpose. And I think AI, if we do it correctly, will help. It'll help alleviate all the things we don't like to do and allow people, put people in positions where it's purpose driven, that they actually feel like they're doing something versus just answering a where's my order call, 1,000 times a day.
Absolutely. I love how you saw a need and you've used your past experience to build something. But I love how we've been talking about authenticity too, because you're building a system to help people be more human and the other
Yeah.
things they're doing, but you're also giving through your book an opportunity to really learn about how do I be more relational in my job, because we're seeing with AI and with all the things that have happened in the past five
Yeah.
years in our culture that there's this isolating going on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so in order to connect with our employees and build culture, the things that you've done with the villain trap, what
Yeah.
you're doing now
Yeah.
with providing the
And
service.
they go hand in hand. And I talk about this when I talk about customer service. There's a lot of CX influencers that will, oh, you need to measure different. You need to implement this tool or that tool to improve your service. None of that matters. What matters is if your employees don't feel nurtured and valued and supported and loved, they're never going to be able to provide excellent service to the customer because it takes three things. Empathy, patience, and warmth are the three things that drive superior customer service. How can I, as a frontline employee, give you those three things when I'm not getting those things from my employer? Right?
Right.
And so you're never going to achieve an acceptable level or an amazing level of customer service unless the leaders in the company take a hard look internally, because what's happening now is those same leaders are villainizing the employees. We need you to come back in the office 5 days a week because we don't trust that you're working at home. All right. So there's problem number one. And employees are villainizing their leaders and their companies by saying, you don't listen to us. You don't understand what our needs are. You don't care about us. So how can you have a thriving organization, especially around service, when the leaders and the employees in the organization are at odds? It'll never happen.
Right. So being able to have that unique environment and it's never been more important to build culture than right now.
Never. I so
Because
agree with that, Dana.
when
Yeah,
we've got to build authentic leaders, authentic teams that want to connect, and then have tools like AI, like what you've done with voice, that can be an augment,
that's
another
right.
option.
That's right.
But I think when we, as leaders, as founders, people like yourself, are building these cultures, that is the most important thing to think about, because you're right. The customers feel it. They feel the culture, and they
They're
feel.
like the kids in the divorce, right? They're the ones that get the short end of the stick because
Yeah.
mom and dad are fighting, and the customer is the kid, and they're the ones that unfortunately reap the benefits, and I use that term negatively, of what's happening.
Mhm.
You look at what's happening in companies like Starbucks and these other companies that have been around for a long time that were perceived as these great places to work, now starting to erode because there's a breakdown between what leaders believe they need and what employees believe they need, and nobody's talking to each other. And it's a silent killer. I think that's the thing that people don't understand. I look at it as a cancer. Once it's in your organization and you've got employees and leaders in a blame bubble and everybody's pointing fingers, it's not big and loud, right? What it is, it's creeping under the surface, and little by little, it's like death by a thousand cuts.
Mhm.
Little by little, your culture is being eroded. You may not know it in year one or year two or year three, but you're going to get to a place where you're going to look and go, "What happened? Like what happened to my culture? What happened to my business and my revenue and all these employees?" And you're never going to understand completely why, because it's a silent killer. It sits below the surface.
And if you're that person in an organization who is in leadership, and you've got those kind of people around you, you can make a difference
Can
by
make a big difference.
by
Yes,
reading the book,
that's right. Yeah,
looking internally. What are
yeah,
you bringing? What are you owning that
yeah.
you have? And not being a part of that culture of consistently blaming and
Blame.
not
That's
being
exactly right. Yeah, we have to get back to a place, I think, where as leaders in particular, we recognize that our job is to be a servant of those who work for us. That
accountable.
is your job as a leader. Your job is, I always said, is to nurture and love and develop the team and leave you better than I found you,
Mhm.
is the job of the leader. And I think what's happened is we've just got into this look at me, self-absorbed culture. And I blame social media on that, a lot of that on social media, to the point now where you can't own your poor decisions because it would ruin your personal reputation. And so that's why people are like, no, it's not me, it's you, and I didn't do this, and you did this. And there's such a release you get when you don't have to do that anymore, because it takes a lot of energy. I say blame burns a lot of calories when you're
Mhm.
blaming, because you got to really, but when you just accept your responsibility and you accept the consequences, good or bad, of that, it's liberating. It doesn't sound liberating, but it really is a liberating
It
thing.
is a freedom, because when you're in that authenticity, everything is so much easier.
That's right.
You can be more creative, you can be
Yes.
your unique self, and you're not trying to be something you're not.
Yeah.
So that is so true. Well, as we get ready to close out, is there anything, Chris, as you think about the book, or even just as you think about what you've been developing for your clients around AI, is there anything that's coming up for you right now that you want to make sure that our listeners hear from you
Yeah.
as we close out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would just, gosh, I feel like I have a million things going on at once, which, it's a good feeling to have. And there's a lot of really cool things. I think I would leave your listeners with, this probably less about what I have coming up and just a thought that I really believe we're at a crossroads societally. And I mean globally. I just don't mean in the US, where it's almost this crescendo that's happening where we're so hyper focused on blaming other people, other things for our shortcomings and our problems that I worry about what the next 5 or 10 years is going to look like for us, for our children. And it's not a society I want to live in. And I really hope people would be brave enough. And again, you don't have to be a leader in a company because we're all leaders in some capacity. Would take a moment and read the book, even if you only get halfway through the book, and that you take one or two pieces out of that could hopefully help you, whether it's at work or at home or in your community, really think about what I think the key to happiness is, and that's helping and supporting others. And I want us to get back to that. I want us to get back to a place where we recognize less about our differences and more about we're here because we're human, and we need to support each other and we need to nurture each other. Because I'm not too sure where we're headed as a society in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's my hope. And the last thing I'll tell you about AI is get out there and learn. The best thing anybody can do right now is play with it, read about it, understand it, so that you know what it is and what it isn't, and you're not swept under the undercurrent of all the, AI is bad or AI is good, that you make informed decisions for you and your business. And you do that by educating yourself.
I love that. Well, I know here we are so thrilled that you were here with us today
Thank
on
you.
Dominate Your Day and really bringing tools and resources to our leaders and to our followers that will help them be their best. We're all perfectly human and we're
Yes,
going to
we
make
are.
mistakes and we're
That's
going to
right.
do things that aren't what we think they should be, but it doesn't matter as long as you're being authentically yourself. So
That's absolutely true. And I love what you're doing with your podcast and
thank
your
you.
business, helping people. It's such a cool alignment to be able to talk about authenticity because we need more of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And
Thank you, Dana.
if people want to follow you or find you, what's the best place they can do that?
Yeah, if you want to learn a little bit more about the book, you can go to www.thevillaintrap.com and it tells you a little bit more. And then you can find the link to Amazon to order the book. And if you would like to follow me, almost everything I do is on LinkedIn. And so
Great.
you can just find me under my name, Chris Gillen, Gillen. Love for you to follow me. I try to post 3 or 4 unique, different things a week. So look forward to some of your listeners coming over.
Well, and thank you for building a personal brand that's making a difference right now.
Thank
So,
you very much.
all right. Loved having you and
Thanks,
come
Dana.
back.
All
Okay.
right. Take care. Bye bye.
Mhm.